Greetings, everyone. Your cartoonist pal Stan here with another episode of 50 Years in the Dungeon, the show where I'm celebrating the fact that 2024 is the 50th anniversary of the game Dungeons and Dragons and the entire hobby of tabletop role-playing games. And I'm doing that by hosting this show and inviting friends on, people who have also worked on the game at various times, to talk about their experience in gaming as a hobby and gaming as a profession, and as wise people who've been around the block that you may want to listen to, or not. What do we know? We're just gamers who got lucky. Hello, Michael. Thanks for coming. Good to see you. I am wearing my New York Mets regalia because I'm a big Mets fan. And right before coming on the show today, I was listening to the radio broadcast of their playoff game. They won their round of the National League Divisional Series today. Woohoo! Let's go Mets! On to the championship series. So yes, you can be a nerd and a sports fan. I'm living proof. So my guest today is a game designer and author, and heck of a fella, named Bruce Cordell, who I worked with at TSR and at Wizards of the Coast. We in fact got hired at TSR within a month or two of each other. So our time in D&D professionally kind of syncs up. I think Bruce came out of the sciences, if I remember correctly. He'll tell us when we chat. I came out of editing and graphics and smaller press gaming. But we came in together. We were the tail end of the class of 95. Well, I think Bruce might have started early night. Again, why am I guessing? I should just click this button over here, and that will bring in Bruce Cordell. Bruce, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Stan. Yeah, I think that sounds about accurate. 95. I came in October of 95, actually.
So yeah, you were like a month or less than later than when I got there.
Okay, yeah. I feel like I was like one of the last people brought into the design side of things. And I wasn't even brought into the design side of things. I was hired to write a text-based multi-user text-based hallucination.
It's weird. It's come up a bunch in these conversations. 95, a lot of people of consequence, a lot of names that got remembered were hired in 95. And Ed Stark, I think, was the front end of it. Ed Stark and Carrie Bebris and Miranda Horner and Jeff Quick and Sean Reynolds. It was a big hiring time. And we were the last wave of TSR hires.
Keith Strom, maybe?
Keith Strom, absolutely Keith Strom. Cindy Rice. It's weird. So I have determined that the class of 95 is a thing in D&D history.
I'll buy that.
Adam Mowry says, "Hi everyone, looking forward to hearing from Bruce. Loves all your novels."
Oh, thank you, Adam.
Bruce, you came up most recently when I had Monty on as a guest because you and he knew each other. Yeah, this guy called Monty Cook. I don't know. Yeah. No, I know he's got another pen. No, I think no. That's he uses that for writing too. Because you and he started gaming together early in your gaming lives. But let's kind of roll that back and say, how did you just get into gaming?
My very first introduction was by overhearing. I was at a Boy Scout camp, and I was probably I don't know what grade, maybe junior high, maybe grade school. But the older scouts were playing something around a table at night on a picnic table with lanterns and stuff, and it kind of crept up, and they had these things, dungeon geomorphs. I don't know if you remember what those are, but they were kind of pre-made dungeon tile types things that you could put your own stuff on. And they were talking about how They were, all the players, which I realized later who they were talking about how they were trying to sneak into this room. And one guy was going on, the DM obviously was talking about how this ogre was sitting there and they were trying to get this room. And the ogre was just like picking up orcs or dwarves or something and just eating them and spitting out, spitting out the bones. And what they were trying to do to get around this ogre, and it sounds very, kind of blasé right now. But at that time, I was like, what? And you can say what you want to do. So that was my very first introduction to role playing games, D&D. And I went home and I used my allowance to go and buy the blue box, which was in the store at the time. So whenever that was, 78, 79. And the box I got didn't have dice in it. It had chits you could cut out and put in Dixie cups. So that was my dice until I made my own dice out of this sort of white, flour and clay, which are very crappy. But 6 months later, I ended up getting the actual dice, which I still have a few of, in very bad, condition. Because
well, they were in very bad condition even in the 70s.
Yeah, so that was my introduction to D&D, and then I started playing I became the game master for my group of scouts. At my level, whatever that was. We were in Boy Scouts. It wasn't Cub Scouts, and kind of went up through there. So that was it.
I think it's funny that blue box set is also that was my first game rules product too, and I love that.
I still have it right here behind me.
Yeah, you know what? I don't. It's somehow that I've since reacquired a copy of the Blue Book. So, but
it's in pretty crappy condition.
Yeah, no, I've got mine. Mine's in perfect condition because I got it basically new out of the archives.
Hold on. It's right here.
There it is. There it is.
Oh my god. Yep, so much nostalgia just looking at this thing. So much tape on the corners.
Yeah. So, you know what? That actually is a good segue for me to do some promotion for myself before we get back into you. But that, of course, was one of the drawings I did early on for the 1978. That was the drawing for me over the cover of the Player's Handbook. And I want people to know that starting tomorrow, I'm going to have a fundraiser going, a Kickstarter going, to do a calendar.
Oh, really?
2025 calendar, wall and desk version, and with the art that came from this show. And the January page is my interpretation of that cover.
So do you have a sign up and let me know about this Kickstarter?
I do. In fact, if you want to find out about this, you would go to newsstandproject.com.
Oh, that's pretty clever.
And that'll forward you over to the Kickstarter page where it's going on. And I will be posting about this, of course, in the show's newsletter. If you're not signed up for the newsletter, it's free. You should. 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com. And yes, let's go Mets, K-Man. Yeah, so I'll be promoting that again probably at the end of the show. But that seemed like a really good segue from that piece of art. I love that piece. Have you seen the original?
I did when they pulled it out of when we were at Wizards. They pulled it out one day, and I took some pictures of it.
Yeah.
I probably have those pictures somewhere, but no, it's so much more brilliant in when you see it. The actual piece of art.
I think when they found it, I was in San Diego. I was down working at Upper Deck at the time, and when I went back to work at Wizards as a contractor, I kept asking, "Where is it? Can I see it?" And they kept putting me off. And just because it was in storage somewhere, and no one really wanted to go get it. But on the last day of my contract, they took some pity on me and brought me in and let me see the have a private audience with the with the painting. It was and it means a lot to me. That I was surprised at how I
You're
don't know.
obviously more, you've gone into you're a cartoonist and stuff, but every D&D player when they're young is sort of, an amateur drawer, which I
Yeah.
certainly was. And many of the drawings that I did at the time looked weirdly like a fighter looked like this guy with the bow, and the wizard looked like this guy with the torch. Oh, it was very formative on my early drawings.
um, yeah. So, when did you when did you move on to using the hardcovers, the Player's Handbook?
I didn't I didn't move on to using the hardcovers until I was in shop class in 8th grade, and I was making a coaster out of leather, and I had a crossed sword and a crossed axe, right? And that was my coaster. And some kid came up behind me and just got my attention. Do you play D&D? I was like, I do. I didn't say D&D or anything on it, but
Yeah.
he just knew. And that turned out to be Monty Cook, and him and another friend of mine, JD Peterson, who was also in that shop class. I didn't know him. I didn't know JD. I didn't know Monty. I'd seen him around, right? But didn't know him from anybody else. But we started talking, and we started playing D&D within like a month, right? And he had recently got, I don't know, the player's handbook, or maybe it was the monster manual. I don't know. He had one of the hardcovers early
Yeah.
on, and that was a whole new revelation for me. I was like, what? There are hardcovers? I thought I had all of what D&D had to offer. And so we started playing in 8th grade, and we it was just me, Monty, and JD for a while. And but then we started gathering. We were kind of a nucleus of a larger group of friends, of which
Hmm.
ultimately grew to like 6 or 7. And there were other always sort of satellite people in high school who was like, oh, I'd like to play D&D. But the 6 of us were kind of the core that went all the way through high school as like really good friends. We were also in debate, and debate was a huge thing in our school. So that was something we all did together as well, D&D and debate. A couple of us played football, but that wasn't really the big push of our group.
Um, yeah, that's D and D. Debate the third D.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. So, and we played D&D, but we were also getting Dragon magazine, and
right.
so we found out about things like villains and vigilantes, and like some superhero game. I think it was. I didn't actually see your interview with Monty, but I'm sure he talked about waiting for this Marvel superhero game to come or something, or maybe his villains and vigilantes to come,
Yeah.
and we just couldn't wait. And so him and JD, made up their own rules,
Yeah.
which kind of, I'm sure, just forced them into, becoming game designers early, because like, well, let's just say it works this way,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
So fun
That's
times.
yeah. We
Oh,
did.
Words of Creation. Oh, that made no fucking sense, but it was super fun. Sorry, I used the F bomb there.
It's all right. It's all right. There's,
Oh, Gamma World, yes.
you
Oh,
can
yeah,
work as you can
yes.
work as
Gamma
blue
World,
as you
my
want.
girl.
It's okay.
We spent 3 hours making up characters with Gamma World rules and alternate rules, and then we had the first encounter, and I was like, oh, let's see what's in this room. Oh, Gamma Moths, let's roll on this table. Oh, you're all dead. Oh, I shouldn't have said that out loud. Oh, so I love Gamma World, still love it to this day. I haven't worked on a game, but that
Right.
very first encounter, I was like, oh, I killed everybody. Oh, that's a GM lesson, but that I guess I had to learn. But
I have now figured out that K-Man is my friend Kerry, who is one of my college friends and housemates, because he posted FTM, which stands for the Fabulous Team Mutants. That was the campaign, the 8-year Villains and Vigilantes campaign that we ran through college and beyond.
oh, very cool.
Thank
Oh,
you to
thanks.
Bruce for the 3.5 expanded Psionics Handbook. Is my favorite book in that edition. Wish they would tap you to bring it to 5A.
Yeah, well, yeah.
You've
You never
you've
know, I
got
suppose.
it.
Well, not at this point. Well, then I guess it's still very similar to 5e, the new D&D one, right?
All right. Before we move on, I'm going to switch views here, as I do, and I'm going to start working on this week's uh, cartoon homage, which is the art, like the art that's in the calendar I showed before. And today's product is a product called the Sinister Spire, which we were talking about the show you had something to do with, but not a. We talked about it. It's like, not any real awesome stories about that. But
I, I
I
will
just,
I will relate the story to that about that. But yeah,
yeah,
when you want me to. But,
no. I don't want to push that. I think the main thing that's interesting to me is in 30 episodes of bringing people on. This is the first time that I think that I've had someone that I'm talking to and I'm drawing a product they did. They were involved with. They have their name on the cover somewhere. So,
well, let
uh,
me quickly address commenter. See, Sharon Cordell Mack. Oh, that's my mom. So my mom.
hello, Mrs. Cordell Mack.
Yes, I also played a lot of D&D in college. I was a GM all throughout college, and that's kind of what got me playing D&D. And then my first job outside of college was working in a genetics lab where I got to work on the incipient internet, where I learned how to code for mushes and muds, and that's why TSR finally hired me, because they wanted to have a D&D branded multi-user shared hallucination or multi-user dungeon. And I quit my job working for a biopharmaceutical company to go do that. And I'm sure my mom and dad were very sad that their son had walked away from a biopharmaceutical degree to make less money to write, silly games. But here we are today. So I think it worked out.
But it worked out in the long run. So you say you had a pharmaceutical degree, or that's
I had a degree in like biology. I did molecular biology and then just like regular biology. And I had been working in a genetics lab the whole time as a work study. That
yeah.
you got awarded back in the day. And so I had 5 years of experience doing that. So I was an easy hire for a startup biopharmaceutical company back in the day, and we were working on. Uh, I'm sorry, going off on a tangent here, but
It's
we
all
were
right.
working on creating rapidly evolving RNA to find a target of interest, um, which kept coming up on problems because the RNA would immediately dissolve in the bloodstream. But they kept working on that, and other groups kept working on that, and ultimately, I quit. Biochemical, biopharmaceutical industry in 1995, but
Mm.
you know, sort of work moved forward, and hey, look, we got these really great vaccines, which were rapidly created by using RNA evolutionary techniques, and then they were able to put a capsule around the RNA that was not toxic and also allowed it to stay in the blood long enough to be effective. So anyway, wow, that's a long way around to
That's all
talk
right.
about. I got
You
hired at TSR.
gotta show off a little. So, how long were you working in that field before you? Um, I mean, I'm guessing doing the mud and mush stuff was something you did as a hobby while you were working in that field.
Yeah, because in order to make like the RNA sequences, you needed a computer to put in the sequences and run the machine, and that those computers were connected to the internet. And I was like, oh, what are these things? Muds and mushes, right? So yeah, I had a lot of downtime, and honestly, I spent a lot of time after work connected to the internet, learning that and playing it. I played in a fantasy world that was based on the worlds of Zelazny in the
Amber.
nine princes of Amber world. Spent
Yeah.
a lot of time in that, and then I graduated into a Elendor, it was called, which was a world of a Tolkien aficionados,
Yeah.
and I had many different roles in that game. I was I don't know I was Saruman at one point, and I built his domain. I was the Balrog, and I built Moria. I built part of Bree. I don't know. I did a lot of. I was known as the king of database bloat at one point because I so in there coding things, and like I said, I learned how to code interesting things, and That's what D&D, that's what TSR was looking for at the time. I'd also been, I guess I should back up a little bit,
Sure.
and say that I did have a couple of game credits, and that was down to Monty 100% because while I was working in this, he had gotten a job at Iron Crown Enterprises as an editor, and
Right.
he started to tell me, if you were to write something, I bet you could get it published. And I was like, nah, I don't think so. And this went on for probably a good 2 years before I was still working in the lab on campus when I was still in college. Um, but I finally was like, okay, let's give this a shot. And they had just come out with something called Dark Space, and that kind of
Mhm.
really captured my imagination. And so I started writing stuff for Dark Space, and it got published, lo and behold. And then I wrote a bunch of stuff for their Creatures and Treasures too, or Creatures something too. Wrote a bunch of creatures, and that got published. So I had some publishing cred. But like you said, Stan, early in the beginning of this thing, just got lucky. Yeah, I just got lucky that Monty had a job working at Iron Crown, and he would convince me that I should try my hand at it.
Well, I mean, I think a
So I
lot
don't
of
know if they
it.
would have hired me at TSR if I hadn't had those gaming credits. Even though they didn't hire me to write games, they hired me to code for a mush. So I don't know. It all worked out.
I think there are a lot of people that have that a version of that, right? Either I mean, from the early people who got in because they happened to be in Lake Geneva and happened to be going to school with one of the Gygaxes, to there was a period of time when TSR was hiring people out of Games Designer Workshop, um, and West End Games, which is the one I came out of. And my segue into West End Games was similar to yours. I knew Ed Stark, and he was there working, and he would tell us, "Hey, if you guys pitch this, or I need someone to write this," and there were several people that made it to different depths. It it really came down to how much you really wanted to do it. Right? It was the entree that you got. Right? And knowing someone would get you a foot in the door, but it was you had to then prove yourself. You had to do it.
True, right. I wasn't, if I couldn't write a single thing. Speaking of which, I see Michael said, did my education and previous career ever relate directly to anything I worked on? A lot of things I worked on, indirectly because I was, always interested in ecosystems and that sort of thing. But the very first thing I worked on of any substance at TSR was Gates of Firestorm Peak. And there was this whole region inside Gates of Firestorm Peak that there was an alternate ecology, and it was sort of a Lamarckian sort of world as opposed to an evolutionary world. So traits could be passed on much more easily without genes. And it was all it was all madness and sort of Cthulhuid. It was also influenced by call it a Lovecraftian sort of mindset.
Mm,
But yeah, so that my interest in biology and alternate evolutionary type of pathways certainly played a big part in Gates of Firestorm Peak. Um, and the way the how a life form works. When I was working on the Lithiad, I said, how do lithids come to be, right? And I came up with the idea like, well, maybe they take a regular person and they put a tadpole in their brain, a lithid tadpole, and that slowly, has its fill of the brain, and suddenly you're getting an lithid out of this, and that became part of the lithid lore. And I hear that they use that to great effect in Baldur's Gate 3, most recently. So biology. So yeah, everything. Certainly back then, a lot of things I wrote had a biological life cycle sort of uh, influence is the word I'm looking for.
right, right. Yeah, when I was talking with Sean Reynolds, he was mentioning how his background in chemistry also, we bring the things we know in. And I think kind of like what you were saying, if you look at it from strictly the sciencey end of it, you go, it's nonsense. But it gives you the seeds to build something the knowledge. We're all bringing our suitcase with us, and so I don't think it could help but influence, show up in some ways, just because of what you know and how it helps you see a problem.
Yeah, I mean, you got to write what you have an interest in and makes and excites you, right? So
Yeah,
that makes sense. I'm gonna. Oh, thanks, Adam. Cool, Scion. Yeah, those I love playing Scions myself. A little self-serving there for myself. I'm gonna
that's
play
all
this
right.
character, and I'm running this power for myself. I think I was
I
playing a
like
Scion
playing my own classes. Yeah.
whose campaign was I playing? I ended up doing that quite a bit, and every so often I'd be like, "Oh, I wrote this character. I wrote this addition to this character class, and I think it's a little overpowered." Oh
That'll
well,
happen too, right?
yeah. But I was gonna go back. Oh yeah, the Sinister Spire. So there was a period of time when Wizards started to want to reduce the cycle time of creating of games, and so for all of my career up to a certain point, um, I was pretty much the primary author on most things,
Hmm.
but they decided that we get these books out faster if we have multiple authors, and one of the so the in-house author would write up an outline, write some opening sections or other sections of the book, or maybe even write up to half of it, but potentially write up to even like 20% to a third. And Sinister Spire was one of those that I wrote probably only 20% of the book because I don't. Well, one, I don't have a physical copy of it here, which is maddening to me. It's got to be one of the few books that I actually don't actually own a copy of. But two, I can't find a copy of it in my files of as having worked on it, which makes me think it had a different name, that a working name that I worked on it. So I'll actually have to go through and rather than doing a search for Sinister Spire, I'll have to go through because I was going to be like, oh yeah, I remember, but now it's I've written so many things that this
Right?
one is not pinging my memory, sadly, which is
Yeah.
that's good.
I was saying in it as we were chatting before the show that everyone I know there comes a point in your career when you've been around long enough that a product will come up and someone will say I love that, or they'll show it to you and you'll see your name on it. You go, I don't I don't remember doing anything. Was I involved in that?
I remember
And
working with
and
Ari Marmel, and I
yeah.
remember different people, but yeah, so yes, 100%.
And there was a period after I left Wizards more than before, where I know from talking to people that they started the development team started they made an actual development team, and they started taking a very heavy role in what were you on the development team?
No, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. Who and they would take a very active role in looking at what the turnover was and saying, you know what, that doesn't work so well here, but it'd work well in another book. And I know that there are some things in my career that I wound up with credits for because I wrote them for other things, and they got picked up and moved over into a book.
Interesting.
Usually not, first name on the credit, but like in their designers, Stan. I'm like, really?
That was another iteration of things that happened while I was, like first it was multiple authors, and then we're going to have a development team, and I think the development teams are great. I think that it can really help a product, but at the time, uh, I was not a fan of the particular way that iterated. Um,
Yeah,
but it is what it is. There's some real gems came out of the process, and it's all good. Right. So right now, but so the way it worked, though, I think the reason I disliked the process was because you had a manuscript that perhaps you were the only author on, um, and you had handed over to development, and that was it. You lost any authority over it,
yeah,
and developers then became the owners of the manuscript, and whatever they made changes with, whether that was it, and you never saw it again, right? You never got time scheduled to see it again, and that that wasn't my favorite way of working. Um, so you can imagine my love and surprise that in 20 you know 20 wow 2013, yeah, 2013, when I left Wizards after fifth edition, that the development process at MCG is goes to developer. They write up all the comments they want, and then it goes back to the designer. And the designer, looks at the comments and decides, oh yeah, this is good, oh this is bad, blah blah blah, right? And they incorporate, they update, they write a second draft. Then it goes to the creative director, who, let's see, MCG, that's Monty, and he'll give his comments, go back to you one more time, and you have the opportunity to go through it, make your case or not, or go, oh yeah, that's a good point, right? And
Right.
so that is such a great. I love that process. I love the way we do things here. And at Wizards, when they just said, "Oh, we have a development team, you're done," that wasn't so great. And I think they must have adopted that because Magic sort of had that system, and they didn't really give any thought
Yeah.
to. It wasn't the same sort of creative process,
I
and I
you know
don't
what
think
I
it.
go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
I say that kind of subject has come up a few times in
Oh,
different
John.
conversations, and I have, because of these conversations, developed a theory that it's part and process of the companies getting bigger. The bigger they are, the bigger um, the financial requirements that get laid upon it because of the size of the company. The farther away from any individual, including and maybe particularly the people that write it, having control over it, it really becomes just the need for, as you were saying, speeding up the iteration time. That becomes the driving factor, and and smaller companies like MCG, where the people that are the creatives are also the people that are making the decisions, or it's going to follow that much more, that being the driving factor, right? Making the game that our vision is, because it's going to be the coolest, and that's what's going to sell for us.
Yep, no, you're 100% right. It's a life cycle.
Hello,
Uh,
John Ratliff. The horror that was the Rules Council. Okay,
Rules
yeah.
Council, that really brings back
Oh man.
memories.
Um,
Wow, John.
so let's jump back a bit. When you first came to TSR, um, in the
1995.
and you thought you were going to be doing a mush or a mud, but that didn't work out. Uh, what did you start working on? What were you first working on when you got into the building?
Well, I actually, the first week, I think I created a couple characters for a comic book,
Mm-hmm.
like a dwarf and a priest or something like that. And I don't even know, but took like a week or two. And then the very first thing then I was assigned Gates of Firestorm Peak, right? They're like, right, you need to write an adventure. We have a title. It's called Gates of Firestorm Peak. Um, we've got these components, and it's in support of the player's option books. I'm like, oh, player's option books. Okay, let's read up on those. And basically, I was a little bit worried about that because I knew only a subset of people probably used the player's option books. Certainly,
Right.
I had not been at the time. So I ended up creating this system where I just wrote a regular old adventure, but then I had a couple bullet points for each encounter if there were any player's option considerations to also take into account. So if you didn't have player's option, you could just be like, I don't care about those bullet points, right?
Right.
The fun thing about player's option is that they really wanted you to lean into miniatures. So I had a couple huge maps, and I had a bunch of sheets where I could cut out all these creatures and stuff. And yeah, I worked on that for I don't know how long. It was I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head how big that was. It might have been a 96-page product. But the funny thing about that is that I wrote that, and before anyone had ever even reviewed it, before an editor saw it
Mm.
or a brand manager saw it, I had already been assigned to write a couple other things, I think, including Return to the Tomb of Horrors. So it was a little like, at the time I was like, whatever. But as I think about it later, I was like, what if someone had picked up Gates of Firestorm Peak and said, "Wow, this is the worst piece of dreck I've ever seen. We gotta fire this guy. Oh, he's already 6 months into uh, Return of the Tomb of Horrors." John asked, "Where do I rank Return of the Tomb of Horrors among my many releases?" Well, it's way up there, John, because one, you were one of the editors who worked on it, but two, it was one of my earliest releases. Is one of something a module that I keep looking up this way because I have a copy of it up on my. I'll just grab it. Sorry. It was one of the first things I did, and it was a box set, and I was given a lot of time to work on it. Actually, I had to work partly on it freelance to get it all done. Um, but yeah, it was, all those first few things I worked on in the early '90s really are very meaningful for me, and I rank them, way up at the top. Kind of the same way I rank a lot of things I worked on recently at the top because they're in my memory. They're very fresh in my memory. All the stuff in the middle, the mushy middle, that I'm like, oh, Sinister Spire? What? I don't. Although speaking of 3.5 psionics, Knight Tomia and Adam were talking about. I love psionics so much that my license plate for my car says psionic. Right? That's my license plate, and I've
Oh,
had that
still?
still. Yep. Even though
Yeah.
I've got it from my newer car in 2020. So yep. Although most people look at it and go, "Psionic? What does that mean?" Never mind. It's the power of the mind, my friend. Are you not a science fiction fan? Are you not a D&D fan? No, no. Most people.
Well, more and more people are these days.
That's true. That is a good point. So yeah, that was my first few things at TSR. I worked on College of Wizardry. Oh man, yeah, just being able to go down and look at the artists working on the art and looking
Yeah.
at the mappers, working on the maps, and being able to talk to them about the various things. That was so magical back then. It was so great. And worked on the Lithiad, and then the three adventures that went with that. And I didn't work on the Sea Devil base book, but I worked on I wrote the three adventures that followed that. I just did a lot of things.
So for those youngins who weren't around, what was the Lithiad?
The Lithiad was kind of a source book on Illithids, and it was it was like a coffee book table for Illithids. It was meant to be not quite so dense in its information, but have a lot of pictures and a lot of culture and a lot of some game mechanics. And it really allowed me to put a lot of interesting lore into the Lithids, right? About how there were a couple other things that I put in there as well besides the Illithid
Right.
tadpoles. But yeah, so yeah, it was a fun book, and a lot of that material has remained part as many of the things we wrote way back then, right? As things get brought forward into newer editions and become part of the lore of D&D. Michael is asking,
Yeah.
what aspect of RPG design do I enjoy the most, or did I enjoy? I'm still doing it, by the way. I'm still my main 9 to 5 job for the last 10 years. What is it that I enjoy the most?
So is it is
Just
it
being
the,
in the flow, being having an idea. Well, you work your way up to an idea, and you work your way up to some. You're slowly building up an outline, and you're working on a problem. I guess what I enjoy the most is like, walking away and like working out, or you might be taking a shower, you wake up in the morning, and suddenly you're like, oh my god, this is the perfect solution to that problem, or oh, this is the perfect corollary to that will bring the story forward, or be super exciting or great. That moment of like your subconscious has obviously been toiling or working, or something has happened where suddenly unexpectedly this gift of creativity, I guess, is just given to you by your brain. That's, I
Right.
guess, what I. And then writing it up, and seeing a finished book is great. Playing it is great. I was just telling Stan before we began that I discovered right after the pandemic, when I went MCG went to Gen Con, and not many people were going back then, and everyone was masked up, and a lot of the GMs that we had signed up ended up not showing up, and so I jumped into like running 5 different games as the GM, which I didn't normally do. I run a few maybe, but I discovered, what I love about RPG design is running RPGs that I've written at conventions, because everyone there is so excited to play. They're there to have a good time. It's not a play test. It's not any other sort of situation. It's just you're there for the game, and yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. So this last year at Gen Con, this year I ran like 4 games as well, and I'm going to go to Gamehole Con here in a week or so, and I'll run
Mm.
several games as well. And it's
Do you have a preference between uh, design, like mechanical design, and adventure design?
I don't have a preference. I like them both. I like writing adventures. I like coming up with the storylines, but I also like the mechanical design of types, which are sort of the class. We have descriptors and we have foci, and I love all putting those aspects. I love coming up with items, but with the lore that goes along with the items. Love the story of the world.
Right.
Like I wrote this product called Gods of the Fall, which was a fantasy world where the gods of that world, their heaven suddenly solidified and fell to the earth and smashed, creating this post-apocalyptic fantasy world. And 42 years later, PCs were starting to get tingles of divine power, right? So there was a story where PCs had to fix this broken world, but it was also this mechanical opportunity to say, well, how do you become gods? What's the mechanics behind that? Where does this go? And how does it work as it goes along? How do you get dominions? What are the obligations you have to accomplish in order to move up? Do you need followers? All those sorts of things. And, it's a super fun game world that had both a lot of mechanics and a lot of uh, let's see if I can pull out a copy here without making a huge mess on my desk. Here we go. And also, I was super lucky enough to get a new artist who was new to us and who now has gone on and does a lot of magic stuff. But he did this magnificent piece of art. I'm not sure if it's coming
Yeah.
through on
Hold on.
video.
Let me switch back over and
Oh, okay, let's see.
yeah.
Is that, yeah? Because it's just amazing work here. So
Yeah.
anyway, anyway, I like them both. I like both the story and the mechanics of whatever it is I'm working on. Right now, I'm working on something called Gunslinger Knights, which is a setting where it's kind of an Arthurian world. That's not exactly right. There's this? It's called the Order of Gunslinger Knights, Knights, where this Arthurian group of knights who ride motorcycles and shoot pistols are protecting the world from these creatures and nightmares that fall from these storms. So it's kind of goofy, but also kind of Arthurian mythos to it, and the mechanics of the new types that we're coming up with, these 3 different types of knights, and the various things they can do, how they can specialize. Lots of mechanics based uh, uh, writing in that. Right, I just spent like 11 pages writing up these new classes, these new types, and now I'm working on their oaths. The oaths they might take, which is more story based. But it's one working mechanics one day, working on story based mechanics the next day.
So on top of game design, you have written a fair number of novels.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of stories, yeah, yeah. I've written. So I was lucky once again to be near people who were publishers of novels, and so I would go over there every so often and be like, "Hey, if you need a new novel writer who has some depth, you could try me out." I don't know what I said. That sounds like no one's going to hire this dope. But they wanted someone to write a choose your own adventure novel. That's how I got in. And I wrote that, but then that license got killed. But based on the strength of the choose your own uh, that text that I had, they said, "Hey, would you like to be a house name on the TH Lane?" And so I got in as an actual novel writer as
Was
TH Lane for Oath of New Rule.
what was what was the license?
It was the bug license.
Was that Centipede?
Centipede, yes.
Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah. I got some stories about that too.
Oh, yeah? Are they something you can repeat?
Well, I mean, I remember when you were working on that. I think I gave you some when I was cleaning out uh, um,
The
one of these
the
one of these
treatises or
the
the World Bible?
flats, the flats. So when for people who don't know, when TSR and Wizards would publish novels, they'd have to pre-sell them to the buyers for Barnes and Noble, or whatever, and they would get the cover art done in advance, and would get just the covers printed, the front cover printed, and on the back side would be sales information about that particular book, and they would take it to all of their sales meetings. So if you were an author, you could get a stack of as many as you wanted, pretty much, just covers of your cover months before, so often before the book was written. And I remember with Centipede, it was it came on shortly after the Hasbro buyout, and Hasbro wanted us to do it. And the reason it stopped was their internal plans for Centipede stopped. So they said, "Yeah, we don't want you making it anymore."
Well, it did get me in the door as a TH Lane writer, and then that, on the strength of that, it got me in the door as a Forgotten Realms novel author, and I wrote several more Forgotten Realms author novels. And it ultimately was part of the reason I ended up leaving Wizards, is because they killed off their novel writing uh, department kind of midway through a 3-book trilogy I was writing, and it was so disheartening. And also, I was saying earlier about how I wasn't necessarily super happy with the way the development teams were working, and
Yeah,
that and the 5e drama that was happening on the design side of things was also sort of disheartening. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to write a science fiction novel, something that Wizards won't want, and I can work on, right? Blah blah blah. And I was so I may be jumping ahead of where you wanted to be, but speaking of novels, writing a science fiction novel.
yeah.
And I was telling my friend Monty about it, and he's like, we could write a game based on that. So I put in my notice, for leaving Wizards in 2013, and joined in October of 2013 MCG, and we started working on a game that became The Strange. So yeah, it worked out, and I finally did get that novel published too, through Angry Robot Books. So yay!
Great. You also did a bunch of Eberron novels, right?
No, only Forgotten Realms.
Oh, why did I
Like
think?
basic D&D, Forgotten Realms, and I did the Myth of the Maker, which is the novel I was just talking about, and then I started a Patreon a few years ago to start to light a fire under my butt to write more novels, because it turns out if someone's not giving me a deadline to write something, I have a hard time actually doing it. And so a self-imposed deadline of having people help support me and send me money every month makes me feel like, oh shit, I need to keep working on these novels.
I owe someone.
Yeah. So I
So is
finished
that
one
still
novel
going
that way,
on?
and I'm working on a second with my Patreon that way.
So are you at patreon.com/Bruce Cordell?
That sounds probably right. Let me look. Yes, yes, that
All
is where
right.
it
Well,
is.
there you go. There's another one. Patreon.com/Bruce Cordell. Write it down, people.
I should make my most recent one free to the public because it's not really. I don't know if I can do that. Edit post.
You
And I
can.
have a blog that doesn't put the Patreon stuff up on there, but it kind of talks about the same sorts of things. Let's see. Anyway, yeah, brucecordell.com.
All right. Yes, and I actually got a. We'll do an overlay of that before we wrap up. It won't
Yeah,
show up on this
no
screen.
worries. I'm here to support you, Stan.
Oh no! Oh no! We are here to celebrate this whole gaming thing
The
together.
50th anniversary of something that certainly changed my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Um. I'm just trying to think about what where I want to aim the next little segment for chatting. Um,
Understood.
and I want to not just have a foot on the screen while I think. uh, how would you compare game writing and novel writing? I mean, we already have that difference between crunchy game design and adventure game design, and now we throw in fiction writing, prose writing.
I
And
appreciate that
I'm not
question.
asking you to judge one over the other, but how do you think they are the same or different? How do they interact with each other?
This is a question I've been asked in the past, and I think I failed to have a really great answer, but I think I finally, just in this very moment of you asking the question, I have an answer that's making me happy because my previous answer was like, I don't know.
Well, yeah,
They both are writing, but you know what I think it is? When you're a writer, you try and develop different voices for different types of writing, not only for different projects, but for different characters.
yeah,
Hopefully, that's hard. But I think that I'm actually pretty good at of having a voice for mechanical writing, right? To try
hmm
and be, it's something that I've been developing over the years as well, right? I'm sure it was much more, kind of fluffy and flowing and extraneous words that you don't necessarily need. But I think mechanical writing is just another voice that you develop. I mean, sure, you have it requires you to have a lot of your lore down, which is the rules in this case. But
right,
it's really just another voice. And when you are writing fiction, you want to have the lore of the world that you're writing in down as well, right? And each individual character and an idea of where the story is going to go. The outline. In the same way, you'll have an outline for a game book. You'll have an outline for your novel, right? Hopefully,
yeah,
pantsing it is not a way to go. At least for me, I tried it once and it was an unmitigated disaster.
yeah, yeah.
Having an outline, man, that is the way to go. Like a novel, like an RPG. So yeah, I think it's just understanding that you need to think about it as having another voice, and it's your mechanical writing voice. And I think,
Okay,
yeah,
yeah, that
that
makes
can make
sense. That makes sense to me.
anyone a better writer in either realm if they think of it that way. I think.
Well, I think
You have to like that voice. You have to like, the way, oh, how will this magical item work? How will this, psionic item work? How will this power work? And hopefully it's a new and surprising way. And a lot of those things, none of them are pure mechanic, right? It's,
right,
unlike some types of things, you always have to have an overlay of story, an overlay of flavor, right? You can't just have, and they take 3 damage, they take 4 damage. It's like, you talk about how a whip of flame comes from the edge of the wand and zaps them in the eyes and burns out their circuits, or makes them nauseous, right? You describe story type things that are happening mechanically, right? Otherwise the mechanics just fall away and they have no meaning.
right. I think and I think I'm afraid that how this is going to come out is going to sound like a knock on card games, but card games don't have the room for a lot of that. The mechanics are clearly paramount, and in I think as I think what you were saying spoke to me in that even when you're doing mechanical stuff for role playing games, it has to be it has to have a narrative cover. It has to have a narrative skin because, as you were saying, you don't want it just to be A plus B equals C. You know, carry the carry the leftover.
I
It
did one of those passes. I was one of those people once who did a pass on magic cards to give flavor text as they called it,
yeah
for a bunch of different things. And I was like, oh, this is cool, this is fun. But then I discovered that after I did it once and turned over all this work, that they don't just accept your work; they actually assign the same thing to 5 different people, and then
right.
they select amongst what the best. And it's like, oh, okay, so I only 1/5 of the work I get paid for. Okay, nope, I'm out. This is not my game. Back to RPGs. This is
Wait,
freelance. I
they
don't
they
need.
only paid you for the ones they kept?
Yeah,
Ooh,
at least at that time. And I was like, this is freelance. I don't need.
yeah, no, that's no good. No bueno.
So Chris Andrew, I apologize if I mispronounced your
Yeah,
name. Asked what's the favorite campaign I ever played in. Lots of them. It's hard to actually pick one down, but there is one that does stand out, and probably because it's an early one. And back in high school, my friend JD Peterson had a Underdark campaign, and it was kind of the time we were exploring sort of Wahoo characters, and sort of like characters morally not necessarily were heroes, but just accumulating power. And so, and it was a new GM. We JD was a fantastic dungeon master, and the stories he would weave were just great. And he was also a great artist, so he would draw up all the villains we would face. And he wasn't afraid of making bad things happen to the characters as well, which was kind of a new thing for me. But yeah, it was a super great campaign. It lasted for many months, and it was very formative. One of the ones that went off before we all went off to college that we played in. Super fun. We actually just called it Descent. That was the name of the game, because it all started with those Descent modules, right? That's how it started. But then it just became this whole campaign that JD entirely made up himself. So it was pretty amazing.
um, cool. What about more recent ones? I know that. So you know what? No, here's in throughout the conversations. Besides the writing, the authoring that we were talking about, you we were talking about the fact that you started doing something that was kind of tied into Zelazny and Amber, and brought in mentioned some Lovecraft, and I know that had some kind of influence on the Alithiad stuff. That certainly imagery wise, and what what other authors have been influential on you? I, fiction or game or you know
Uh, Larry Niven,
yeah
Barnes, Bryn, um, uh, Dennis Taylor more recently. I mean, I basically I'm always reading, so
right.
just any author. God, I would have to look at my queue of books.
I don't think too hard about. I'm not like looking for a reading list on it. I
Right.
thought maybe that there would be a
Ilona Andrews has this
yeah.
Magic Bites series of books, which I thought there was some fun, interesting ideas in there more recently, right? The Aronovich books, which are amazing, which are the Magic Detective in London.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I like I was, there's the Bobiverse books by Dennis Taylor. Is that the right author's name? I'm actually listening to him, but super great science fiction. Kind of it's a little tongue in cheek, but also it's like exploring Van Neumann probes If they were
Mm-hmm.
intelligent, oh yeah, Julian May, yes, huge, huge effect on my psionics back in the day. Yes, very much so. I need to. I actually reread those probably like 5 years ago. Those are super super cool. Yeah. No, yeah. This it's hard to pin down one, right? You like you said before, Stan. You kind of what interests you. When you're writing, it all gels together. That's why every so often you need to take a break, right? Or you need to keep. I mean, I read all the time. I'm always watching things because I enjoy those sorts of things. But I think every so often it's good to take a month off.
Yeah, yeah. What what are some of your
I
interests
wish.
beyond the game world? Like when you decide to take some time away, what kind of things do you like to do?
I used to be very much into martial arts, but
Mm.
I decided I didn't want to be punched in the head again, so stopped doing that. So now I work out a lot ish and rollerblade. My partner and I, we like to play video games together, and so we'll sit and we've played many games. Um, when we first got together, I remember I was talking about JD.
Hmm.
So him, and he who was down in Portland, we would we would play video games, multi-user games together. Video like um, Hero City. No, it wasn't called Hero City. City of Heroes,
Heroes. Yeah.
and some other games where we could all play. And so we played for many years, like just playing that sort of things, like on the weekends and stuff like that, and traveling. Um, I don't know, like reading, watching fun shows.
All right. It's
So
you sound like you're like I don't know if that's enough of an answer. That's plenty of an answer.
yeah, no. I'm just trying to think. Yeah, yeah. Cooking. We like to cook.
Um, and Michael in chat thinks City of Heroes was awesome.
It
It
was a sad
was.
day. I have when they sent the goodbye message. It was this little banner,
Yeah.
which was a while back. I saved it, and I have it. I send it to myself like every couple years just to remind myself, like, oh yes, City of Heroes. What a great time that was. Yes, I did read the wild cards. Yep, that was also formative, of course.
Yeah.
Can't forget that. The Zelazny character in that was particularly great. I thought the sleeper, I think his name was, because he would fall asleep and he'd wake up and he'd have a new power. I'm like, no, that's the way to do it. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop with the sketching because I'm happy with how the characters are, and I'm not getting into that city thing now.
That looks great, Stan.
Oh, thank you. Yes, as per usual, I will continue this offline, and as it's finished, I will post. When it's finished, I will post it most immediately to the 50 Years in the Dungeon Substack. People get to see it there first. And then eventually, I don't hide it from the world. But if you want to see it first, that's the place to be. And again, I'll plug that later because that's what shows are all about, plugging your stuff. Yeah, no, I really like. First of all, I like the design of that Medusa. She's got a really cool feeling about her. And that city is really creepy, and I don't know how in the hell I'm going to draw that, but I'll try. All right, so I'm going to hit this button here, and it's going to go back to just you and me. So we're here. The reason I started the show was to celebrate this 50th anniversary of D&D and gaming, and it. You and I both started about the same year. We're talking about the same starting product, and here we are, 45 years later.
Oh, probably less than that, isn't it?
No, because if it's 50 years that the game has been
oh yes, it's 50 years. Yes,
50 years, this is it's pretty close to the front end of that product came out. So. Yeah, we've been gaming for 45 years of our lives.
I see what you're saying. Yes. Yes. I thought you were saying since the time we started at TSR, but
Oh no,
yes.
not quite that. um,
Yeah, I was 6 when D&D came out, I guess. If it's 50 years of D&D.
well, I I was 10.
Oh, all right.
uh, so yeah, so we're hitting this thing. Have you? Has anyone reached out to you to do? I mean, besides me, to do anything involved with what the celebrating this?
Yeah, I showed up on Peter's
Right, right.
he had a series of games that was celebrating each of the editions, and so I decided to show up on the second edition one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he gave me a choice, and of all the various editions I worked on, I was like, let's do second, right? And I don't think Peter quite appreciated that we kept working on second edition. You know, he brought us all out there in '97, but we
Yeah,
kept working on second edition all the way through until 2000, right? I mean,
yeah,
he was totally focused on third, but I don't. You know, we ended up releasing a lot of second edition stuff
yeah.
even after we came out there. I mean, a lot of I have like 18 credits that it's between 14 and 18. I'd have to count again.
Right.
Over 14, perhaps all the way to 18, that came out, well, from 95 to 2000. The last one being Die Vecna Die, right? Which
Die,
was
Vecna,
supposed
die.
to fill your second edition game and get ready, be an end to your second edition game and bring you into third edition.
So, Die, Vecna, die. I remember having uh, having arguments with our brand team at the time about that title because they didn't want it. They thought
Oh.
this is a dumb title. And we're trying to convince them, no, this is an awesome title. And in the end, we did convince them. But the thing that they fought us on and won was that they hated the commas in the title. So this title has too much punctuation in it. So if you look at the book, it should be die, comma, Vecna, comma, die, exclamation point. And, right? But it's not. It's just 3 words, die, Vecna, die.
That's funny because in my imagination of the cover, I see those
Right.
commas, but I'm sure you're right.
As Steve Winter says, yes, the Vecna, the. It's our German module. Um, I remember. I think it might be the only product that you and I worked on together was the Bastion of Broken Souls because you did the design on that, and I had development. I don't. I think we
But
had.
your development wasn't the kind of development I was talking
No,
about.
it was before that.
Yeah.
But that was a weird phase for me when I had been a creative director. And it
Hmm.
was before I had this period where
I
I
think you
no
were
longer
my
had anything
boss
to
for a
creative
while, right?
direct. Hmm?
Weren't you my boss for a while?
Yes. After that, I became your boss for a
Oh,
while,
okay. Yeah.
and maybe even during it, because I'd gotten that assignment, and then I got the assignment to be the boss of the staff. I was the staff wrangler instead of a project and world wrangler. Um, so yes, I think I was. 'Cause I remember we did have. I, I don't know if you remember this, but there were a couple of times I brought you in to ask you about wanting to change some words just because they were very highfalutin.
Hmm.
And
And what was my reaction to that?
your reaction was that you felt pretty strongly that you wanted highfalutin words. You remembered from your days
I
first
apologize.
learning. No, no, no. I thought you were. Well, we talked about it. It wasn't an argument. You were saying how you remembered the early games. You had to look words up, and you thought that was good, and that you were intentionally trying to do that, to have words that someone might have to look up.
I remember
And
that conversation.
my my answer was, well, I looked this one up in 3 dictionaries, and it wasn't in any of them. So that word I want to take out, and I
Yep.
just don't want. I want you to be okay with that. And
Well, that
we
was very
came.
kind of you to even ask, and I've come around on that particular point. If you can't, if you get knocked out of the flow of something, especially in the modern age, right? When you don't,
Yeah,
maybe back then when we were in the 70s and 80s, there was less demand on our attention. But right now, you just need to write something people can get into and understand, and doesn't knock them out of the flow. So I have totally flip flopped on old Bruce's opinion on that. So
we,
you were so right.
our
I was
our
so wrong.
positions grow as we do.
Yeah.
But I mean, I totally get it, right? That uh, there was a point, particularly in the early D&D, where part of what was appealing about it was that you had this feeling of expertise, and you were learning a thing that was difficult. And in that kind of situation, the idea of having challenging language, evocative but challenging language, fits perfectly. And in a situation where you're thinking more, well, we want to get it to the audience that may be coming in new, and we don't want to scare them away. And so it's on a continuum. But I think we came up with a great solution, right? I said, okay, these are the 3 dictionaries. If it's not in 2 of the 3, then we will change the word.
The fact that you were even willing to ask me if you wanted to change a word is just so amazing, right? I was like,
Well,
so anyway, thanks
again,
for
I mean, kind of like what
considering.
you were saying about MCG, right? As when
Yes.
you come out of the position of being a designer, you're a little more uh, conscious of, this person wrote it this way. They did it for a reason.
Yep. And yeah, so you were yeah, that's the way I love it. Although I'm a lot less precious about things. I really try and be like, hmm, this person who's bringing this topic to my attention has a reason for it, and
Yeah,
I really need to pay attention to it and not be like, no, I like mine better, right? I think that's, like you said, maturity. I was
but I mean,
probably,
you
by the
weren't
time when we were working on that, I was probably 30, right? Because
right.
I was 27 when I got hired at,
That seems so young now.
I know, 30 years old.
But you
So
weren't. I mean, you
young.
weren't precious about it. And I say you weren't. You said I did it for a reason, and we talked about what that reason was. It was all very. It was perfectly reasonable, and we came up with a good solution. It just it sticks in my mind. I think maybe because of that.
Yep. Yes, it was Riz, Chris.
It was totally Riz. Okay, so we reached the 50th anniversary. Besides old, because 30-year-olds are so young, how you feeling about still being in gaming at this point in your career?
I feel very lucky still. Um, I feel lucky that I'm, at a smaller company that um, is able to, allow me to stretch my creative muscles, kind of in the same way TSR and early Wizards did before the acquisition by Hasbro.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that it's a job, like any other, but at the end of the day, um, the in my current position, the frustrations, the stuff that come from a regular job, you have to be like, yes, but I got to write about something cool. So yay.
Yeah.
And even our company, even though we have our kind of our own game systems, the Cipher system, which is great because the GM doesn't have to roll dice, player rolls all the dice. We also did some 5e stuff, right? Because I had worked on 5e up to the end, and so I was able to kind of put out some stuff. So I've been working on D&D, and not
Right.
branded that way, right?
Right.
But 5e compatible, as we say, even just as of a few years ago.
So I mean, that makes me think about, we have
Rainbreaker, yes. Thanks,
uh,
D&D.
we have you and I are among the people who have worked on second and third and 3.5. I didn't do anything for fourth. I don't know if you did work on fourth edition
Oh yeah.
and
Yep.
the early fifth edition, and now current fifth edition for this. Um, what do you think about the? I don't. You know what? I don't want to ask you to judge how what you think about this, the way the game is developing, but what do you think about the just the fact that it is? There are a lot of people who seem to have problems as the game continues to change as it grows.
I think that's been true though of every edition. People, like a particular edition that they like, and they're like, well, I like the feel of my edition, right? And that's I think I think that needs a refresh every so often, right? I don't know if it needs it, but it's just the nature of the beast, and it's
Right,
going to change. And there's so many options out there. If you don't like some particular thing, well, one, you can homebrew it, right? Two,
right.
you can try something else, right, and see if you like that, like Cipher System, or like Shadow Dark, which like won all those awards at the Ennies this last time
Yeah,
around. We actually
yeah.
played a couple of games of that. It's like very, very, very nostalgic of like old school D&D, but also uses some of the very light rules of 5e, which kind of
Hmm.
has a nice balance there. And there's so many different types of games you can play, and it's all because of D&D, right? These are all clear descendants of D&D, and it's great. It's the ecosystem is doing great. More people are playing D&D or role playing games in general than at any time in the past, thanks
Right.
to the people who are online promoting it, playing it. So no, it's amazing time to still be part of the industry.
I agree. Chris has a question that I don't. I think I personally think it's too early in this new current version. It hasn't been around long enough for anyone to have played it enough to be able to answer those kind of questions
I'm gonna
yet.
say its greatest strength is that it's pretty compatible with what we've all been playing for the last, or what people who've really been playing D&D, but for the
Yeah.
last many years, right? I mean, it's compatible ish. So yeah, no, I think that's a good strength.
So
And
when
I
you
don't know what its greatest flaw is.
yeah um, when you got to choose uh, your version of D&D for Peter's show, why did you choose second edition?
Um, it's the edition I came in on,
Yeah.
as a professional. And I knew that. Also, I knew that Monty was going to be on the third edition show, and he would have a lot to say. So, and Sean, and I was like, I work with these guys day in and day out. I
Right.
kind of want to, be on a, I don't want to be like I'm part of the gang, right? So I
Yeah.
wanted to branch out. But of course, turns out that Zeb and John Peterson and other people on that show also had a lot to say. So I was like, okay, I'll just hang out here and try and get a word in edgewise. And then we played the game, and I picked the Ranger, which for 2E was like, can you have a less powerful class than the Ranger? I don't know, maybe, but the Ranger was like, oh. Anyway, it was fun. I enjoyed it. I got to sit next to Stephen Winter, and we were joking through the whole thing, so it was a fun time.
And I think you can probably still go back and watch that on Gen Con TV's feed somewhere. So go check it out. That was a really good series. Um, all right, so I think we're getting ready to wrap up. We talked before about the fact that you have a website, brucecordell.com, that will probably have links to things like your Patreon, which we think
Yep.
is patreon.com/brucecordell,
Yes.
and info on the things that
BruceCordell.com. It's the source of all Bruce Cordell on the line, right? If I put anything up, I just put a blog post up yesterday, in fact.
it is the source of all Bruce Cordell.
Yes. Or at
All of
least
Bruce Cordell
a
flows through
reflection. Yes.
brucecordell.com. Thank you for coming and having this conversation with me. I really enjoyed it. Uh,
Thank
I
you for having me,
know.
Sam.
No, I'm happy to. Uh, I've been saying to a lot of people that I'm enjoying this show so much. I started with the idea of doing these 50, and that's what this show is. But I'm going to keep going when it's over. So I'm already thinking about ways to bring everyone back. I think that getting like roundtable conversations of 3 or 4 people will be an interesting thing to do. So I'm already like pairing you off with other people. Who can I put Bruce on the table with? That'd be great. You're going to be at Gamehole Con next week, where Monty Cook Games has a lounge. I understand.
Yeah, there's like this overpass / area that's kind of wide, and there's a bar up there, and we have our booth ish up there, and all the tables up there. We kind of run our games on, and there's couches and stuff, so you can hang out. Yeah, it's fun.
So look for Bruce there. Look, I'm probably going to spend a lot of time at the Monty Cook Lounge too, so you can look for me there.
Hey.
So yeah, I'm gonna go and do an outro. You hang on, Bruce, so you and I can make a little goodbye afterwards. But thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for everyone in the comments too. From me.
All right, there we go. That was a fun little conversation with Bruce Cordell. Bruce, again, because of his science background, I always feel like I'm learning things from, even if the science doesn't come particularly to it. I think that his perspective on a lot of how he goes about things is we're all informed by what we do, and I think that his approach to things, the filters that I perceive are coming from that are instructive to me, and I learned a lot from Bruce. Anyway, thank you all for being here. As I said, next week I'm going to be at Gamehole Con, so I'm not going to be here to do a live show. However, I have pre-recorded a show, and I just realized that I was talking about when I talked to Monty. You haven't seen that yet, because that's next week's show. Next week, Monty is going to be the guest. Monty Cook is going to be my guest here. Recorded a couple of weeks ago. And you can watch that. I think that's only going to be on the YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel. So if you are watching on Facebook or Twitch or something else, you're going to have to come over to YouTube to see that episode. YouTube.com/TheRealStanX. I don't usually advertise that here because it doesn't matter. But you'll need that next time. I want to remind everyone that there is a free newsletter for this show, 50yearsinthedungeon.substack.com, where you will get all the information about things like that. You would find out that Monty is going to be the guest. There'll be a post saying that. And there'll be a link to where you can watch it. So please do. And if you're going to be at Gamehole Con, please stop by and say hi. I'll be around lots of places, but I'll spend a lot of time with my friends at Monty Cook Games. What else do I want to say? I want to remind everyone that I have a Kickstarter that is launching tomorrow for the calendar. 50 Years in the Dungeon calendar, featuring art that I've done for this show. Don't want to show that one. There you go. Printed all nice. You can hang it on your wall, or you can get a desk calendar version so you can put it on your desk. It's fun, yo. And it's not going to be for sale anywhere else as far as I know. I'm not putting it into distribution. I don't have a web store where I'm going to put it up. If you want to get one of those, you come to the Kickstarter. That's your choice. It's going to be running starting tomorrow until the 29th of October. October, that's the month we're in. So come and see it. Newsstandproject.com will take you to the Kickstarter page. Please, 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 please go there. Go there now. You can sign up so you'll get a message when it actually goes live. And even if you don't want to do it, If you're watching this and you've watched this far into the episode and you're still watching, you could do me a big favor and just tell other people about it. Tell people about the fact that this exists. The only way fundraisers like that work is if the word gets out as far and wide as possible. So, I'll stop talking about that after I say newsstandproject.com one more time. Thank you, everyone. Have a good time. I'll see you live in a few weeks, but the show will be here, even if I'm not. Come on back.